So, you ever watch Zootopia and think to yourself, this is pretty good, but what if it was a dark, gritty crime drama set in the 1920s with a lot more violence and mature overtones? Well, my friends, you would have Blacksad. Blacksad is a comic by by Juan Diaz Canales, and he was also he worked at Disney for a long time. Basically, these are comics from a Hispanic publisher, and they were converted to English for years. And when I show you the interior art, you'll understand why this is a work of art. Now, I do want to stress that, like, yes, this is anthropomorphic animals. No, this is not a furry book. At least I don't consider it one. I think this is underrated art. Um, I've really enjoyed the series. The comic takes forever to come out because it's highly detailed. But I so far have 5 of the 7 books, which really counts as really should be 6 because the last 2 all fall down is 2 parts. So I haven't read that. I haven't read that 2-parter yet. But I recently just got a Silent Hell, so I figured, you know what, this is more than enough to kind of really gush about Blacksad and why more people should read it. I did do reviews of the first 3 stories years ago, but I figured since I have a bigger audience now, I kind of figured it'd be kind of nice to really bring this comic to light. So, what is Blacksad about? Blacksad is about a black and white cat detective by the name of John Blacksad, who is a freelance private investigator who goes on these. Each story, it's very much like I said earlier, it's a 1920s kind of crime noir kind of story. And if anyone knows me, I am a sucker for noir stories. I love the 1920s kind of pulp Art Deco kind of stories. I'm a real sucker for them. Anyway, so the first book is actually a collection of the first 3 stories. The other 2 were the other stories were all in their own books. I think it was because the creator had only made 3 stories at the time, so they just Dark Horse collected this in the first 3 stories into one collected story. And I'll go into each one each time, but then he made more, so hence why we have A Silent Hell, Amarillo, and All Fall Down Parts 1 and 2. And from what I understand, there's also talk of maybe another book on the way in the near future. All Fall Down Part 2 took until maybe last year to come out. So I think there may be one more. I'm not sure on that, but I have heard back and forth. Anyway, so this actually gets a lot of praise. Like on this book alone, you've got Stan Lee praising it. You got Neil Adams, not Neil Gaiman, Neil Adams. This is a grade A book that's seriously underrated. Now, like I said, each story follows John Blacksad, who is a cat / detective, and he's basically going through all these different all these different crimes, and some of it is just kind of misadventures he gets wrapped up in because he's like, crap. It's almost like a Cowboy Bebop kind of story where it's like he does one job and then it just spirals into something else, which I really like. It also, side note, speaking of Cowboy Bebop, I kind of imagine Steve Blum's voice for John. Whenever I'm reading the comic, John Blacksad, the character, I hear Steve Blum's voice. Yes, I know he got a different voice for a video game, which most of you would probably know the character more. Yeah, I was wondering how long I could not talk about the video game until someone typed it up. So yes, I'm aware that the video game is there, and I'm sure a lot more people know about the video game than they do the comic. In fact, I've seen a lot of people say that they thought it's just a video game character. No, he was a comic book character. Anyway, so getting back to the stories. Let's actually talk about the stories to begin with. The first one, Somewhere in the Shadows, talks about John investigating the murder of a former lover, leading to him discovering that it's the food chain leading to those events is higher and higher. and it's talking about like how far he'd go to get revenge for someone who did break his heart. I think it's a really solid start. It really grounds the universe. Also the artwork. Good God, is the artwork just amazing. I want to show you like a solid piece because it's also really hard to do that because this book is mature. Like, I'm not joking. There is sex and violence everywhere. So it's a beautiful book, but it's also very mature. Yeah, I gotta find like a perfect image because like I need you to understand that this comic is a work of art. And I think that's kind of the serious part is art. Like, yeah, it's stuff like this, and I'll go into it when I talk about Silent Hell, especially. But yeah, this comic is littered with just art pieces left and right, and I think that's more evident in Silent Hell. But I'll get to that book in a moment. Getting back to Somewhere in the Shadows, it's a great story. It really establishes the world through John's perspective as he's moving to find this murderer. It's a really solid opening, and I think it's great. This next story, however, Arctic Nation, is probably my favorite story. Arctic Nation follows John going up to a town in the far north where he encounters a group of white supremacists. Yes, we are doing the animal. This is what I like. This is the only time, because every time we do animal stories, we always talk about, we use it as a vehicle for talking about, racism. And not to say I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's been overdone. So this is the only time they do it, and it's done very mature. It follows John being caught up with a group of white supremacists and also discovering, like, there's a big revenge plot behind it. It gets insane. And it's also, this is where we get the most mature parts of the comic. It's a brutal story. It's also like, no one walks away happy. That's the other thing with these comics is no one walks away happy. John is emphasis on his last name, Blacksad, because he is certainly sad by the end of a majority of these adventures. And Arctic Nation is the high point, is the epitome of that kind of story. Anyway, finally we have Red Soul. Red Soul, I think, is the weakest story because I feel like it kind of doesn't really hit. It talks more about like the Cold War and also the fears of it, but I don't think it hits. Also, the story kind of meanders for a lot, and I forget a lot of characters in this story. So it's Red Soul is definitely a weak note of the trilogy, but would I still recommend buying this book? Absolutely. Even with Red Soul, there's still a lot of good in that comic. Arctic Nation is a masterpiece, and Somewhere in the Shadows is a great intro. So I would say, and you get three stories for the price of one in this book, and for I think $30, that's not bad. But I don't know how hard it is to get this book now. I don't know how much Dark Horse is still printing this book. I got it I was in 2012, and yeah. So yeah. Then we come to the next book, Blacksad, A Silent Hell. This is set in New Orleans, and I had actually read this book in New Orleans when I first I was there on vacation, and this is where I think the artwork really nails it, because I need you to understand this is 1920s New Orleans in an animal kind of world, and like all of this, it's stuff like this that is just beautiful. And these are actual buildings in New Orleans. When I was there, there were buildings I recognized because of this comic, and it shows the attention to detail of this story. So yeah, I love the attention to detail in the artwork. I'm going to keep gushing about it. But anyway, this comic is a little more bizarre, but I like it. Essentially, John is in New Orleans, and he gets wrapped up in like a voodoo mystery involving gangsters and a weird super soldier virus. It's very bizarre, but I really liked it. It's another somber tale, and it's a great one. I gush about this one a lot. I think Silent Hell might be my second favorite behind Arctic Nation, but yeah. And so far, because again, I don't have All Fall Down, is Amarillo. Amarillo is a direct sequel to A Silent Hell, where Blacksad is basically coming back from Louisiana after, like, oh Jesus, that was a lot, and he encounters a billionaire who wants to get his car back to Amarillo, Texas, and he'll pay Blacksad a large sum of money to get his car there in one piece. And along the way, it's let's just say hilarity ensues. It's a cool road trip story. It's also very brutal. It's a nice look at 1920s Midwest America. Like, all of these are like looks into the 1920s era of that kind of era of each world. Like, Somewhere in the Shadows is New York. Arctic Nation is like Canada and all that, and Red Soul is like the West Coast. And of course, I talked about Louisiana. This is about Americana Midwest. From what I understand, All Fall Down is more like a Russian terrorist plot, from what I understand. So I'm curious to see how that will play out in that comic. Amarillo is a good story. It's more of I would say it's more of a story where John is just being thrown into one bad situation after another. After how heavy A Silent Hell is, it's kind of a nice story as well. I think it also has one of the better it has a kind of better ending, I would say. Like, kind of one that's just like, yeah, it's kind of it ends on a nicer note, kinda. But yeah, still. Anyway, so like I said, if you haven't already, really give Blacksad a look. I highly recommend this book. I don't think people talk enough about this comic, and I think it is because there is that stigma of like, oh, it's a furry book. I can assure you, it's more than that. It's more than just anthropomorphic animals, and like, again, if you want to if you like watched Zootopia and just went, I wish this was more of a gritty story, here you go. And it's less pop songs, way less pop songs, and beautiful artwork. I think all these books are a masterpiece. Anyway, so that's my recommendation to all of you. So yeah. Anyway, if you guys have read Blacksad, let me know in the comments below. But like I said, you really need to read this series if you haven't already. Anyway, if you have read it, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.